everyone, welcome to the Huddle Breakdown with me, Laura Bradburn. Slightly slow off the marks there, as you can probably tell. I'm joined by James and Alan. The full lineup is back together. James, how was your road trip across the States? Sounded very romantic, I have to say.
Well, as my wife would probably testify, because I was involved, it wasn't that romantic. But it was great. It was a spectacular September kind of northeast weather, low humidity, nice temperate temperature. Sun was out. Got off the grid for the most part. A lot of hiking, biking, and got to see parts of the country I've never been to before up in Maine, Acadia National Park, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, it was great. Good battery recharger, as they say. So I'm ready to get stuck in. Let's go.
Yeah, I was thinking about you in the sort of the amazing places you must be seeing while I was stuck in my work this week in an undisclosed location in dreary Scotland. Yeah, Alan, how are you?
Yeah, all good. Can't wait for James's brain dump of all the things he's been worrying about whilst he's been hiking without a phone.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do think we might be taking on the role of counsellors or shrinks, as you would say over
That's
there,
right.
James.
That's right.
To you this week. What we have to cover, obviously, is the Partick Thistle match at the weekend in the League Cup, which we duly won, thankfully, relatively comfortably, which I don't think we can ever take for granted these days. And then we'll touch a little bit on the Belgrade match, which is happening on Red Star Belgrade match is happening on Wednesday. We are recording this on Monday night of that week. Alan, I'll come to you first. The Partick Thistle match. I think there was, certainly from my point of view, a little bit of concern just because I didn't really know much about Partick Thistle, and scoring, especially in the first half, has been a bit of an issue for us this season. I was concerned that if we got off to a slow start, that it was going to become more difficult than it needed to be. How was your overall view of the game and how it panned out?
Yeah, I mean, essentially it's over on 46 minutes, and then the rest of it is pretty forgettable and prone to sort of game state damage to the numbers at that point. But up to then, it was tricky. I'd been out all day, son's birthday, as I was watching it quite late at night, and I skipped through. Believe it or not, I wasn't really interested in what Charlie Mulgrew and the other person they had on, I can't even remember who it was now, had to say before the game. So I missed all the stuff about the pitch, so I didn't really know. And then, of course, there's all this supporters throwing stuff on the pitch, so that kind of took my mind off it as well. It wasn't until the end of the game when I thought, bloody hell, it's like a rugby field, or how rugby fields used to be. For those of you who don't like rugby, which I think the majority of listeners, from what I can gather, and are the same ages, and are you much younger than me, which is probably most of the audience, is that rugby pitches, the grass used to be pretty long in comparison to football. Football's always had almost like like a bowling green type of thing. Rugby pitch used to be very long, and it reminded me of old school rugby pitches. Rugby pitches now are much the same as football pitches because they want a nice fast game. But yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of that. And it hadn't been watered, and as I said, I didn't realize that. So that kind of not knowing that, I was getting very frustrated, I suppose, with the early part of the game, how slowly we were moving the ball. But I guess there was an element of that being physically quite difficult. And we were getting very sort of predictable. It seems like, we give it to the new lad and see what he can do. And that seemed to be pretty much our tactic. And to be fair, Partick Thistle, actually, this was in a slightly bizarre way a useful rehearsal for what's about to come in Belgrade. Is that they did a reasonable job of defending the centre of the pitch, which is exactly what Belgrade will do. They will defend the centre of the pitch and push the game wide. But then, they couldn't really double up. We did seem to suddenly have this third man run thing going on down the left, which is quite nice. We did it over and over and over and over again, and got lots of crosses in. So yeah, it was fun. In that once we got going, it was quite fun, and it was fun to see Iheanacho's sort of first start, and another run out for Donovan, and Tounekti is great fun. Balak I thought did pretty well when he came on. He actually did quite a lot of quite nice things, so that was good to see, and I think much needed for him. So yeah, I thought there was lots of good bits in it without there being too much drama. Most of the drama in terms of their shots and efforts at goal came after 3-0 when no one could really be that bothered anymore. So yeah, all good, safely through. Didn't tell us a huge amount, more so about the new players, I guess, is the main learnings.
Speaking of that, and I'm springing this one on you, James, a little bit. I obviously want to know your thoughts overall on the match as well, but I did see an interesting point raised on X, very rare as that is, last or yesterday. Sort of some people saying that there are certain players at the club whose careers are over before they've started. So obviously we didn't see Shin yesterday, didn't see Amura, didn't see JSP, and Engels yet again was starting from the subs bench. What's your thoughts on those particular players and where they stand if they, with all due respect, can't get a start in a League Cup match against Partick Thistle?
Yeah, not bullish. I would say that's probably not a good sign unless, there's always the possibility that somebody's carrying kind of a latent injury that's being nursed back to health. Maybe somebody like Engels, theoretically. I'm not suggesting that's the case. I'm just saying that it's, within the realm of possibilities. But yeah, I think for those that aren't involved at a material degree, I think Engels was even the second midfielder off the bench. So I think not optimistic would be my view. Now, having said that, depending on the matchups, be a little different if we were in the Champions League, obviously, but against Roma, for example, there might be a selection issue depending on how the game's going to shape up, where you could see a different, maybe we'll see. We'll talk about that maybe later in the episode. If there's more flexibility from Rodgers, you could see some different utilization of some of these guys. But yeah, generally speaking, I wouldn't be optimistic about. If I were them, I wouldn't be optimistic on my playing time, given what's been going on.
No, and what was your thoughts on the overall performance? I guess, like I was saying to Alan, a pretty comfortable one, but still things to learn from the new players, like he was saying.
Yeah, I think I can only speak from my perspective. Obviously, I think what I learned in the two games while I was away was largely confirming of what I'd looked at with the players when we signed them. And there's good with that. There's a lot of good with that. Iheanacho is a good creative player in the final third. Like, I don't think that, he's coming, his pedigree, his background. He's a quality footballer. His ability to pick out passes and create like he did with Tounekti, I don't think that's that surprising. Like, even had he been 2 stone overweight, he could have made that pass kind of thing. He looks like he's in decent shape, and some of the kind of more hysterical concerns over him. And again, understandably overwrought with how nuts that final week was in the last 48 hours of the transfer window. And Tounekti's just a really exciting, dynamic player on the ball. That's and I think he's just confirmed that. But I think he's also confirmed that decision-making in the final third is not necessarily a strength. And that gets stress tested as you go up in quality in competition, not only as on a team basis, but like who's actually defending him. So I wouldn't extrapolate too much from the people that were defending him going 1v1. And then even, as Alan said, I think they started to a little bit more. Partick Thistle were starting to double them up. And I'd be surprised, like, if that doesn't become something that we see more with domestic competition, that they'll, slide a midfielder out to help the wing back or fullback defending against them. So yeah, I thought for the most part, Partick Thistle, they've been doing okay in a championship, but most of that's been because of attacking output. Their defensive output has actually been pretty poor. I think I looked it up. They're like the 3rd worst so far. Again, not a huge sample size, but I didn't expect them coming into the game to be, a St. Mirren, or I think they kind of, to their credit, for what they have available. Again, let's remember, Tony Watt was their striker. So he's never been the guy who's going to lead a line and like a really strong defensive effort particularly, as he's gotten older, I should say, let's say the last 5 years. So I thought they did a decent job in the first half hour. They were reasonably organized. And I'll echo what Alan said. I mean, again, just watching on the TV from Underwear CSC on Sunday, it was noticeable to me right away. I mean, it looked like, it wasn't a cow pasture like St. Johnston was last March. So it didn't have the patties laying around, but it was really thick. And I think that was a material factor in the game. I mean, it just really slowed things down. And again, I think it's easy to get overwrought with guys like Carter Vickers. Some of the guys were really struggling with it. I mean, they just were getting kind of stuck with the ball under their feet, and because they were playing in a completely different.
Are you implying
purpose.
I was getting overwrought before the show?
No. I again, it's natural. I don't think that's, if we're gonna.
You were naturally overwrought.
Yeah.
always.
Exactly. I mean, how many times we're going to play on a pitch with that, problem. Although maybe other teams will see it now, and I don't know what the regulations are about how they can, what kind of debacle they can allow their pitch to grow into. But yeah, so I thought I wouldn't get overexcited about the last two games. There were a lot of good things, and they're based off of what we were coming off of. I think they should be, kind of rejoiced and enjoyed. I just question structurally how much of a difference they're going to make, and what these two games, and particularly the Partick Thistle game, is on a forward basis. Like, what does it indicate going forward? I'm a little skeptical on that front.
Yeah, I mean, we do have to hold our horses, and as Alan always says, wait until we get that sample size of 900 minutes before we can do a proper analysis. But Alan, I think one of the players that has been getting a lot of praise, and there's been a lot of excitement around, is Tounekti, because of the amount of creativity he brings into the team, and sometimes the amount of dare I say, cracks that he sort of papers over within the system. What was your impression of his performance again this weekend compared to Kilmarnock, and how vital do you think he could become to making sure that we do manage to create things this season?
I'll put the spoiler up straight away. So this is from the stat pack, which all subscribers can access. So I cheesily have a boy of the match for every game, and for 2 games running now. Not only has he been the stadium man of the match, but also mine also, which is probably going to generate accusations of overwroughtness from our miserable American friend. But he deserves it. I mean, he was only on the pitch 59 minutes, and yet, he topped a number of key metrics, including the highest packing score by 27, which is quite impressive, actually, given he only played 2/3 of the game. Second highest attacking threat score. The highest was actually Yang. Bless him. He scored a goal, nice finish. Which listen, before I'm going to run through all the numbers. I'll just reiterate what I said last week after the Kilmarnock game, which is that if you'd read James's benchmarking report, and you'd read the nice detailed piece that Ross Hall did on Celtic Underground, sort of scouting report of him, there's nothing changed. Nothing has changed. They both got their reports spot on. They both got their analysis spot on. What is fascinating, and let's just boil that down a little bit, in terms of incredible volume of running with the ball. Here he had 12 progressive runs. Now, anything over double figures is kind of, it's Jota really is the only other attacker that's consistently hit those numbers in the time that I've been collecting this data. You really need to go to Christopher Ayer and Frimpong to get higher numbers than that. But for attackers, obviously working in less spaces, their numbers tend to be a little bit lower. So again, double figures in progressive runs. So he's brilliant at running the ball, carrying the ball. He's a dribbler. He's exciting. He likes to take people on. He's a bit crap at shooting, and as James says, final third decision making. He doesn't really create as many chances as you might think. And I don't think I've changed. I don't think anything that we've seen rubbishes any of that analysis, right? However is you never know how a player is going to do in the specific context of playing for this team in this league, right? And it might well be that he can cause absolute carnage with that skill set in this league playing for Celtic. And thus far, he kind of has. His numbers have been pretty spectacular, really, in 2 games. Now, that again, not to get overexcited, you've got to consider the quality of the opposition. We've got to consider how left side dominant Celtic have been and continually feeding them the ball. As James says, it doesn't really gloss over some of the structural issues. I mean, who the hell is going to play on the right wing for the next 3 months? Really, and and the midfield I think we'll come to in a bit more detail. So none of those things, and then centre forward. What I will say on centre forward, just as a slight tangent, is we've now at least got a choice between a very untechnical player who run all day, kick the opposition, press them to death, and if he could get his head back to last season, score lots of goals, and a really good technician who's almost the opposite of that. He's not going to give you that much off the ball, but is incredibly creative and probably a very good technical finisher when he gets a chance. I've got a nice contrast there at least. Let's look at that positively. But back to Tounekti, again, the running with the ball was the big thing, but also, all of those third man runs that I talked about earlier came down that side, and he was an integral part of them. So people, the party were obviously so concerned with him that they weren't picking up McGregor or Tierney or whatever running on the inside channel, and he was picking them out, and Hatate as well, and they were creating chances off of that. So that was impressive. That sort of, I mean, that comes out in 5 secondary assisting passes. That's a very high number for one game, especially for 59 minutes again. So he was the passer that put in the person that created the chance. So, and that was very evident from the game. So that's a slightly deeper, more nuanced interpretation of creativity. It's not just about creating chances, banging balls into the box. It's about creating space for others. It's about feeding other people into good positions who then maybe create a chance. So that's why we need to look at creativity in the wider sense. But listen, let's enjoy the first 2 games. I think he certainly has lightened the mood somewhat. It is a concern that we've got essentially 4 left wingers and no right wingers. one could argue. So that's definitely a problem, and we'll maybe come into some of the concerns as we build towards the game on Wednesday. But listen, definitely to be enjoyed those first 2 games from him.
Yeah, James, because listen, I've had a thinly veiled accusation of being overwrought before the game. I don't care what you say. That was your intention. So I'm going to out you here and say you had a lot of concerns before we pressed record. What were some of those concerns? Where is the worry coming in? As Alan says, looking ahead to Wednesday, and it's fair to say that a win over Kilmarnock and a win over Partick Thistle is not going to placate people for too long if we get up against stronger opposition and show our weaknesses. Where do you think those weaknesses are?
Well, I don't think they've changed, other than Tounekti does materially shift the ability to create some space. So I think we've gone from completely dysfunctional within the manager's preferred game model to some functioning on the left side, which creates its own ripple effects and potential problems. So situationally it can be very effective, but again, I don't think we can underestimate the opposition in perpetuity, that teams aren't going to adjust to the fact that we're a one-sided team that virtually has nothing going on the right side. And you're like, oh, well, let's maybe move a couple guys over that way to help defend this guy who's a 1v1 dribbler and, helps create space. And I agree with Alan. I mean, one of the big risks of a guy like Tounekti, and this is across sports, if you watch an NBA game, when they do the clear out, one-on-one, play in basketball, what inevitably ends up happening is you get a bunch of guys standing there watching their teammate as opposed to moving and cutting. So as long as we're not falling victim to that and enjoying watching this, like the supporters are enjoying this guy be very creative and dynamic on the ball, going 1v1, and we get those third man runners and create more movement off of him. I think that all can be very positive. But again, this is not something that is coming out of nowhere. Alan and I had an in-depth conversation a couple of weeks ago, right after the window. Alan put together, I thought, an excellent presentation on a potential theoretical shift in formation that could alleviate some of the individual issues that we have, all these kind of round peg, square holes. And I think we now have one round peg with a round hole, and that's Tounekti. And that's why he stands out. Like, holy crap, this guy is like the greatest thing that ever happened. But he doesn't change all these other square holes and round pegs.
Incredible what happens when you play a player in his best position, isn't it?
Well, and that fits the system. And right, exactly. So my concern is that because he's done so well in these two games, to me, it's like a classic confirmation bias setup, meaning that because Rodgers has been so resilient to make changes in his second tenure, he now has a really good excuse not to do it, because it looks like maybe something's getting better now. And that, creates and to me, that's what was most like the Partick Thistle game was the game where if he was going to try something different, I'm not even talking about selection, I'm talking about tactical setup. He had a full week with everyone back from international break. Like, I get why going into the Kilmarnock game, that was kind of a broken week because of people being away. But he had a full week, no midweek game. Pretty much most of the people involved were fit and able to train. So if there was going to be, and, we didn't need, it's not like we had no room for error against Partick Thistle, given what, like we talked about, they're not the most dominant defensive team. So I thought that if there was going to be a move towards a shift, this was going to be the game to see it. And we did it. So I think we have basically the same structural problems. Midfield still a problem. Are we still going to have Dyson Maeda as a hold-up striker who's dropping deep as a 9 in build-up? Like that hasn't changed. Like, that's still a terrible idea. Iheanacho, I think, can be very useful. But again, he's not an in-the-box striker. So let's say he's the guy dropping deep. Well, then who's going, is Tounekti guy going to be in the box and finish? That doesn't sound right. Negrin will help. He can box crash. Who's the guy on the right wing? We don't know. You see what I'm saying? Like, so I'm still not sure that the threshold of meeting what we need to do on a sustainable basis for the rest of the season is going to be met if we stick with the status quo. And, the savior, Tounekti is going to be, the thing that's going to, or the person that's going to completely fix all of the problems.
Yeah. Alan, you have posited a potential change in shape that you would like to see. Given what James has said there, how likely are we to see it at all from Brendan Rodgers, or do you think he is as much of an evangelist for his style of football as Ange, for example, has been accused of being in the past?
I don't think he's an evangelist. I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect he feels that Celtic can dominate the game, and this has been almost like a proven game model for success at domestic level. We might see a bit of tinkering in Italy, maybe. Might even see a little bit of tinkering in Belgrade. But again, we'll come to Red Star. They're probably a team that really Celtic should be looking there to go and win the game. That they really should. And this isn't a Champions League level opponent, right? So I don't think we'll see much change there, really. So he's obviously decided he may have decided that introducing a new shape introduces yet more risk, recognizing that there is already risk in having your third choice right back and a midfield that he must recognize is misfiring. I mean, if you cannot see the troubles that McGregor and Hatate in particular are having, it's fascinating to me. So I've done a piece on all three of the midfielders now, very low data samples. So there is definitely some caution needed in coming to sort of radical conclusions about their relative form. But it's interesting to me that the player that seems to get the most criticism and doubt expressed about him is Negrin, who I would argue is the one of the three that's doing his job and doing it pretty well, right? He doesn't have Matt O'Reilly's creative passing, but he's got his box crashing, he's got his goal threat, and he's got his off the ball busyness, if you like. He's very involved, and he's probably a bit more mobile across the ground. He's got ball carrying skills that O'Reilly probably didn't have. O'Reilly preferred to pass the ball, which is sensible. Ball moves quicker than any player. But Negron's the one that people seem to cast doubt upon. And one of the brickbats that gets thrown is, oh well, because he didn't turn up at any of the big games. Well, you tell me one Celtic player that played well at Ibrox and in the 2 matches against Kairat, because I don't remember anybody particularly shining. So I'm not sure why that's thrown at him being the newest member of that midfield. But what is absolutely clear in the numbers is McGregor has reached a place where, if it weren't for the fact that the team is dysfunctional, as James says, you would make a case for we are in Scott Brown 35-year-old territory here, because his numbers have fallen off a cliff so far this season. They really have. Now, I'm not claiming that is absolutely the case, because again, what I think I am wrestling with certainly is how much is that down to sort of dysfunctionality in the team and McGregor having to plug holes, which is not really what you don't want him firefighting, because the only thing in McGregor's game that's going up in a positive direction are volume of defensive actions and success in those actions. So he's actually succeeding to the detriment of his more creative, deep playmaking role. And as for Hatate, his numbers are dreadful. His 4 seasons here have been pretty consistent, actually, and in many cases, especially the more creative metrics, he's actually improved season on season, which is fantastic. But this season, again, small sample, but it didn't improve. It didn't improve at the weekend. Again, almost fallen off a cliff in that regard. And he's a player where we always talk about risk reward. Well, the risks that he's introducing by giving the ball away in bad areas is in no way, shape, or form being balanced out by any creative output. So, again, is the reason for this that fundamentally those three can't play together, or is it some other structural issue with the way that the side is set up? Because it does look like Hitate's being asked to play deeper. All his heat maps indicate he's playing deeper. McGregor's having to do more defensive stuff. Hitate's giving the ball away more than ever and not creating much. Me and James have always said it's better if you pull him deeper. Well, he's now playing deeper and the numbers are getting worse. So maybe we were wrong. I accept that. But Negron, who's being asked to be more of the number 10, is getting up and down the pitch, doing defensive work and getting into the box. So I would say he's the least, in terms of the midfield, he's the least of our problems. But again, I come back to the question: is it structural or is it individual? Is it the impact of individuals either losing form or physically declining? Question.
Yeah, James, where do you stand on that in terms of whether it is structure or depending on individuals? And I guess that brings me back to the point I made at the start of the show. Where does that bring Engels in? Can involving him or swapping him out for one of the guys who's currently being selected more regularly improve the situation at all? Or is he another sort of example of us buying somebody who doesn't fit the system, as some people suspect?
Unfortunately, I think that's the case. I don't see. Now again, this version of Hatate, and again, in fairness to Hatate, he hasn't had functional wing play ahead of him until these last 2 games with one guy, and he was I think he was the one that started the move to spray the ball out to Tounekti on his goal. So to Alan's point, it's difficult, particularly on a shorter time frame, to do quality attribution analysis and break it down between team factors, opposition factors, controllable versus uncontrollable, and actual like idiosyncratic player control. So as you go down in sample size, it gets harder and harder to do that. So I think it's just to me, I'm not seeing the solutions to these problems. And I think this is these two games are classic outcome bias, right? So I very much enjoyed, I was on the Oceanside Walk in Acadia National Park. I downloaded it in the morning, so I listened to Martin and Alan discussing the game, and Alan going on about the penalty call and how, you know, the review show that Willie Collum had done had maybe impacted it, and very fascinating, very good analysis, Alan, as usual. But let's be clear that, you know, I think I saw somebody post like the XG difference non-penalty was within the danger zone, you know, per stats bomb, with, you know, inside one for dropping points, which we always talk about. That's like classic variance. So we were basically a lucky penalty away from dropping points at Kilmarnock, given the mess that we just came out of. Where would we all be sitting here, despite Tounekti having, you know, a great performance? You know, so I would say the underlying fundamentals of that game were not that positive. And then we've just, you know, whooped a bad defensive Partick Thistle team, which I would actually argue we didn't even whoop them that much. Like, it was a solid 4-0, but it wasn't one of these like we're just onslaught. Now the pit, like I said, the pitch had something to do with that probably, but this was not like a rip roaring Celtic goes in and just throttles a lower league team game. You know, so I just think there's, I worry about getting over our skis. And because again, the fundamentals haven't really changed. Our non-penalty XG in the league so far is worse than it was in the 2020-21 season. And that average includes those horrible post-to-bye games when we fielded B teams, right? So it was sub-1. And we talk about that. For a full season, you average sub-1 in non-penalty XG, you're going to drop a lot of points. That's how we get down around 80 points in a total of the season, if you get around that magic 1 in non-penalty XG difference. So again, basically what we're hoping here is that Tounekti and Iheanacho have all of a sudden changed those fundamentals to get that way up. And I don't think that's likely to happen. And that's where we go into this week. Like, I think these are two legit games this week against teams that have people that can hurt us and test our kind of structural issues. I'm not saying they will. Like, this is the test. That's why I'm laying it out there. I don't think these past two games were like really the test as far as whether or not we're, you know, whether I think the renewed bullishness that has arrived all coming off of these two games is warranted, or if we're going to kind of fall back and have more 2-step forward, 1-step back type of situation.
Well, I'll ask you to expand on that going into this week then, because I know you've done a little bit of work on Red Star Belgrade and what to expect from them this coming midweek. You know, what type of team are we likely to be facing here, and what kind of challenges can they pose us?
Yeah, so they're kind of a classic quality Europa League team is how I would characterize them. More of a throwback in the sense that they're still kind of heavy crossing, a lot of aerial crosses. You know, it's stereotypical, but, you know, a lot of good technical players. I think there's some uncertainty going into this game because their kind of top striker just left towards the end of the window to go to Turkey. He's now a teammate of Olivier Ncham. So, you know, 6 degrees of ex-Celtic players. He's at Samsunspor in Turkey. So they now, at least the last 2 games, they've gone towards more of a 4-4-2 with 2 kind of gnarly, old school, and old meaning that both in their mid 30s strikers. One of which, Kayat, I think is his name. I think he's already scored 11 goals this season. So they've got some athleticism in midfield, but I wouldn't call them like, you know, super athletic on a raw athletic basis. It's more, you know, a mix of technical skills and, you know, acceptable speed and quickness, that kind of thing. And they do have a right back who I think will be an interesting challenge for Tounekti, He's a Korean internationalist. I think his name's, well, I'm not going to butcher his name, but and just looking at him, he looks like he's got a little bit more of a physical profile that will present more of a challenge for Tounekti in those kind of 1v1 matchups. But they're good on set pieces, but they're also not, they're not doctrinaire. They're not one of these teams that's going to ticky-tacky. They'll go long when they need to. They'll do some pressing, but they're not going to be like crazy balls to the wall pressing. They'll be more strategic and tactical with it. So they're going to be a good team. And I don't think they're going to be all that fussed at home if we end up with 55 or 60% of the ball either. Like, they're not a ball dominant team. They're more go with the flow, I think, depending on matchup. So I think it's a really good test. Like, to me, this is a litmus test as far as where we're at. Because I agree with Alan. If we were who we should be, this would be a game where we would go in and say, hey, like at Zagreb last season, like, we really should go in expecting to win it. I have more concerns than that, based off of where I think we're at and what their relative strengths and weaknesses appear to be. And they also have this, by the way, I don't know if you would classify him as a wonder kid, but they have this kid, Kostov, I think he's 17, that's playing in their midfield. And he looks, he looks interesting, at least. He's 17 playing at Red Star. So just, he started the last couple of games. So he'll probably be somebody fun. He's either been at the 8 or on the wide right in the 4-4-2.
Well, Kyra Almaty had a wonder kid, and whatever happened to them, I don't know. Alan, do you share James's concerns? I mean, I guess, like, from a very base point of view, I'm always worried about Celtic going away from home because we do so poorly. I get that from a statistician's point of view, it really depends on the team that you're playing and the kind of individual challenges that would pose. But where do you stand in terms of how concerned you are about our ability to get a result on Wednesday?
I'm concerned for the same reasons, in that I don't think we're the best version of ourselves. So we can continue to, complain about the transfer window and not filling, repairing where the damage was forever, I guess. But trying to move on. I think you could easily frame the last 2 games for Celtic as being, as James did characterise it, as moving towards competence, at least from quite a bad place. So take that as a positive. Celtic, being the best version of themselves, should go into this game believing they can win it. This is a team, if you look at their European record, let's say over the last 3 years, 4 years, they've had two fourth place out of 4 finishes in their group, one in the Europa League, one in the Champions League. And then they finished 29 out of the 36 teams in the Champions League group stage last year. They had one noticeable result, which is beating Stuttgart 5-1 at home, which is incredible. And they won 1-0 in Young Boys. We know we played with Young Boys, obviously. We know what a sticky game that was at home. So they managed to win in Switzerland, which is impressive. The fact, arguably, the most impressive result, certainly, of the last campaign they had was beating Bodo Glimt in the playoff to qualify, which is not something I'd be confident we could do. They do concede a lot of goals at this level, and they have done over the last sort of 3 years. Even in the 3 Champions League playoffs that they've had this season, they've conceded sort of 6 goals in their 6 games, and 2 of them were against Lincoln Red Imps. So I think they're a team that
who would concede against them? Jeez.
Madness. They definitely look like they're gettable at this level in terms of conceding goals, because they're actually very similar. I think I've been making comparisons to them. Not all comparisons will fail eventually, obviously, but I was making comparisons to them a week or so ago, knowing we were playing this game, in terms of their transfer business, in terms of a number of young players that they were selling for huge fortunes to big clubs, and they just kind of keep churning the wheel. Now we know that for various reasons the Serbian academy model is more productive than ours, and some of that is very specific to that area. But nevertheless, aspirationally, that's the direction that we should be traveling. And their league is quite similar, the Serbian league, in that they have kind of one main rival, which is Partizan Belgrade, who they beat away from home at the weekend, 2-1, who are really the only club that are anywhere near them. And I know James isn't keen on the ELO ratings, the ELO ratings, but again, it's indicative, not precise. The Celtic have got an ELO rating of 1655. Red Stars is 1590, so they're kind of in the ballpark, really, which is what you'd expect. But if you look at the respective leagues, then if you exclude Partizan, every other team in the Serbian league would have a lower ELO rating than every other team in the Scottish Premier League, other than the two teams that have just been promoted, which was very similar to Kairat, funnily enough. So we all know how that went. So they're in a league which is actually weaker, I would argue, than the SPFL. And guess what? They absolutely dominate it. Last season, they didn't lose a single game. They scored over 100 goals in 34 matches. They've already had 2 7s and a 5, I think, in the league this season. So they're very efficient at beating poor teams in their league, which is something we probably don't do enough of. But as I say, we are playing teams that appear on the face of it to be better than the teams that they play. So all of this really suggests that this is going to be a very, very close game, frankly. I don't know how coherent they are. They've lost a lot of players. They've had a high churn of players, and they're one of these teams that, they bring in Brazilians and Turks and God knows from whoever. It's a bit of a hodgepodge.
They have an Armenian from Russia.
In terms of nationalities, which can be exotic and interesting and all that, or it can be a bit shambolic. So I guess we'll wait and see. But I think Celtic should be going into this game thinking that they can win it for sure. No doubt about that, really. We're not in the Champions League level anymore. This is a team that struggled badly in the Champions League last season, as we did, who like us failed to get in. They lost to a Cypriot team in the playoffs. So we shouldn't go there with any fear. It's just really the question of what is the most coherent Celtic lineup, and maybe we can get into that in the last little bit in terms of how we think the team will line up, what will make us the most coherent we can be for this particular tie.
Yeah, just real quick, my main concern is I think they love a through ball. By the way, that's what I've been able to ascertain in looking at them this weekend upon my return. So I think they have both the personnel, the technical ability, to take advantage of some of the spaces that we've been leaving, that domestically teams haven't been able to do that, including Rangers. Rangers have been, a travesty for the most part in the final third, in creating and capitalizing on space that's available, i.e. making the right decisions at the right time. So they seem to be competent, at least minimally, and a little scary, I would argue, because of, these kind of old, smart, clever strikers that are good finishers. They only need a couple of chances, kind of thing, So this is one of those games where if it goes sideways for us, I think they might only get 6 or 8 shots, but they could score on 3 or 4 of them. Like, that's if they get really good quality opportunities and kind of cutting us open in pockets of space, kind of thing. But again, they're not going to dominate. Like, they're not going to take possession and like pin us in. I'd be surprised anyway if that were the scenario. So I think it'll be more so like as these are at this level, like who actually does well in the final third, and that's that's the biggest concern with them.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, James, on the question that Alan posed to close out the show for us. What do you expect in terms of lineup? Obviously, there was a little bit of switching around. Not everybody who played against Partick Thistle would be expected to start against Red Star in the Champions League. That's habit, the Europa League. So, do you think there's going to be any surprise additions or omissions for the game?
Yeah, I think the big question comes down to what happens at striker and right wing. I mean, I'd be surprised, other than a theoretical scenario where Ralston's fit enough to start over Donovan, which again, I suspect not. I mean, it was in a walking boot from what I read and saw for a little while. So I suspect it'll be the same kind of back five with Schmeichel, obviously, at keeper, and the same midfield. Tounekti will be on the left. I think the big question is it Maeda through the middle with somebody on the right wing. Choose your own adventure. Or whether he decides to go Iheanacho through the middle and Maeda on the right would be kind of my other guess. But that's the intrigue. Like I could see all kinds of decision threads to get you to the different versions. I'd be surprised if it's Balikwisha. I'd be surprised. I hope it's not Balikwisha. I'd be surprised and hope it's not Nygren with angles in midfield, for example. I hope that's not the version that goes in. I could see a logic for it, more defensive, whatever. So I think that's the key, is that kind of right side in the going forward. If gun to my head, he'll go Maeda, and because maybe Iheanacho's not quite ready for, at that level, 60 to 70 minute, complete performance where he's going to have to defend from the front and do all of that. That maybe he'll, we'll see. The right wing, I have I'm literally just guessing. I mean, I think you could come up with all kinds of reasons, none of which were going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I think personally he's going to put Jamal Simpson-Pusey in for his debut at centre back. That's what I think is going to happen.
He's not even in the squad. Just take the 3-0, right?
Yeah, exactly. Alan, where do you sit on this? I tend to go with, I think he'll go Maeda through the middle and somebody on the right hand side. Knowing Brendan as I do, I'm afraid to say it, but I could see a situation where he goes for experience and Forrest starts the game. Is that too lazy of an assumption, or do you think that's a possibility?
I think you're spot on. I think that he's probably saving Forrest for these European matches. There's no way. I mean, Yang played the full 90 minutes. I think that's really just to get him up to speed. Nygren, despite the fact he's played a lot of minutes as a right winger, although I have to question the role precisely that he's played in the past, given how uncomfortably looked in Celtic's version of what a right winger looks like. So I agree. Is kind of misfiring as it's been, that midfield will stick. Even if Rolson was fit, I would argue we should still play Donovan. I think he gives you the same sort of warrior vibes as Ralston, but with more athleticism and more dynamism and more go forward, which I really like about him. His first thought is always forward, and I think we badly need that on the right hand side. We need that energy. We need those attacking vibes, if you like, down that right hand side. Whether he'll get caught out defending, I don't know. He's looked okay so far, obviously without really being put under huge amounts of pressure other than aerially. So as I think the back four and the midfield will be as is. I think Tounekti on the left, but yeah, Maeda will be centre forward. I think it will be Forrest. I think he'll say to James, just give me what you've got, give me what you can, and we know that James Forrest is whatever pace he may have lost, he can make up for to some extent with intelligence and with experience and with game management. All of those things in places like Belgrade are very important. So if it was me, that's what I would do. And I think that's what, given the fact Forrest didn't come on at the weekend, I suspect that's the way that we'll go. Which does, isn't that much different to how we set up in Almaty, was it really? But maybe Tounekti is just that little magic thing that sparks everybody else. I don't know. That's more hope than judgment at this point.
Yeah, speaking of, you used the word vibes there, James. The vibes coming from you when I mentioned Forrest and Alan agreed to it were, I don't want to say negative vibes, but certainly not positive ones.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. But again, this is like least bad option. Pick, as I said, choose your own adventure. Yeah, choose your own adventure. So I get it.
He's the best right winger we have. I don't argue with me in the comments. Seriously.
Yeah, no, I think overall, I'd agree with you. I wonder. So again, in looking at Red Star, and I was going to again try to pronounce his name. It starts with a T, Tikanizian, something like that. Is their left back? He doesn't strike me as terribly athletic particularly for a fullback. So I could see a case to be made that we'd want even Yang to try and test that a little bit on the right side. In his current state, I don't think Forrest is the guy to blow by him. So, I mean, I'd love to get Tounekti against this guy 1v1. Like that matchup I would take all day. Less so with their right back, who again, they play him at right back and then they switch him over to left back. Has been the kind of substitution pattern, the Korean internationalist. But yeah, I think this is why I say no Balikwisha or Nygren, which is you're not really getting the pace and explosiveness that I think will give this guy problems, and you're creating other issues elsewhere potentially. In the case of Nygren, so I'm okay with Forrest, but I'd gun to my head, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I'd probably pick Yang. With rolling the dice that maybe he can give this guy some problems, particularly in behind. But not confident in saying any of it.
We shall see what happens. I think it speaks volumes for the situation that we have on that right wing, that we are, debating between Forrest and Yang as to who might make the start. But
and that last thing I will say, that's partly why I'm putting out the theory that maybe it's Iheanacho through the center and Maeda on the right, because Maeda has one move and it's kick it past the guy and run it down when he's out wide. And I do think that would work against this guy. So now I'm not sure how good Maeda can do that with his left foot kicking to go on his right wide. We'll see. I'd be a little skeptical about that, but I would suggest
Maeda's kicking ability with either foot is as good as the other. And that's not necessarily a good thing.
Probably true.
But no, we'll see what happens. As always, we will be watching and trying not to hide behind the couch while this is on. Anything you guys want to highlight that will be available on huddlebreakdown.com for our subscribers if they happen to subscribe there if they haven't already?
I have a piece that'll be coming out this week, probably be up by the time people view this. Doing a little bit more of a deep dive on passing from the center backs and kind of this continuing, because we had some feedback from subscribers surrounding particularly questions on scales. So I did a little bit of deeper dive on that. So that'll be going up. And I think there's some interesting things to draw from some of the data as far as what perceptions are on our center backs and passing. So that'll be going up probably late Monday or early Tuesday.
Excellent. Alan, anything you want to plug?
Just as I say, the stat pack for the Partick games up there. I say this each time there's a cup match. The data vendors that you might get free data from, FotMob and SofaScore being the two most prominent, I think. They simply don't cover the Scottish Cups, either the Scottish Cup or the League Cup. So if you want detailed match data, player level and opposition level, then please do subscribe, and you will get that for every Celtic Cup game. So essentially, hopefully, that's an extra 9 games a season that you won't get elsewhere. So fill your boots. Just one last thought, by the way. Something about the Tenke conversation that occurred to me when James was talking about decision making. What will be interesting to see on Wednesday is I agree that it's clear in his data, and it's clear even in the volume of assists and goals that he scores, frankly. But I do wonder, that can definitely be a problem up against a packed defence where you've got a million defenders between you and the goal, or between you and the centre of the box. When he's given a little bit more time and space, as he may be, and a counter-attacking opportunities, as we saw with his goal, will his decision making improve under those circumstances? And may actually be an asset in Europe where he's got a bit more time and space, hasn't got such a crowded box to sort of fail to pick someone out in question. Don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm crossing my fingers that happens to be the case. I guess we'll have to just wait and see. James and Alan, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you everybody for watching and or listening. We will see you again next week. James and Alan will see you later in the week with Martin and the second Huddle Breakdown podcast that you can get through huddlebreakdown.com. See you later.